Well, there's perhaps no other writer capable of capturing the seedy underbelly of the Sunshine State with such specificity and wit as Carl Hiaasen. He's a three-time Pulitzer Prize nominee, author of numerous bestsellers, including Striptease and Sick Puppy, and he joins us now by phone. Good morning, Carl Hiaasen.
How are you doing?
I'm wonderful. Thanks so much for being here. We're
Oh, my
also
pleasure.
we're also joined in studio by Randy DeFore, former city council member and co-chair of the 2024-25 Florida Forum Speaker Series. Hi, Randy.
Hey, Ann. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for being here. Also, Kendra McCrary, president of the Women's Board of Wolfson Children's Hospital. Good morning, Kendra.
Good morning.
So, Carl, you are a native Floridian. You've been a reporter and a columnist and an author. And your job has always been to sort of examine the state we're in, Florida. How would you describe the state we're in at this point?
This is a family show, isn't it?
Yes, I guess make
Yeah.
it family friendly if you can.
All right. Yes, I would say it's as tumultuous as it ever has been. I mean, environmentally, we've been on a crisis point for a long time, and that continues. And politically, I think more of the country is keeping an eye on Florida now because of President Trump's presence here, and because so many people that he's recruited to his cabinet and his administration are from Florida. That's not to say they were born in Florida, but they were, have moved here like a lot of folks have.
I recall, and I've been thinking about it lately because there's been a lot of discussion, in this current administration about people, maybe being unsatisfied, thinking about moving somewhere else. And I remember a column from years ago that you wrote about, why remain in Florida? And you described it as being sort of almost like with a hospice patient or a loved one. And that, if somebody is in crisis or in ill health, you don't take off, you hold their hand and you sit by their bedside. And it always struck me as a really, kind of beautiful way to think about the environmental destruction of Florida, that you can't just kind of, take off, but to be there.
I mean, I think it's especially true if you're born here the way I was and my dad was, but it's also true for people that have come here and have been here years and have become attached to it and adopted it as sort of their home state. Is that, one thing is you can't, if everybody that was afraid for Florida left, there'd be nobody remaining to put up a fight. You can't just walk away from something you care about. I think that's true whether in Jacksonville or Key West or Punta Gorda, wherever you are. I mean, there are battles going on, and the environmental battles are always political battles too. They're inseparable, and as you see the political climate change, it's all the more reason to stay and try to fight.
I recall reading that you began writing fiction in order to take all that you knew as a newspaper reporter, an investigative reporter, or a columnist, and kind of get it on the page in a way that you couldn't if it was if it was in a newspaper.
Well, sure. I mean, anyone that's familiar with my books knows that the way it's handled in the novels is it would never make the cut in a newspaper because you can't. I mean, you can't for dialogue even. You can't if you know any cops or first responders or any criminals or smugglers and anything else, they talk a certain way, and most of the time they talk, you can't quote them accurately in a newspaper if you've got children reading the newspaper. It's just the way it is. So the novels are more reflective of the reality of certain situations. But I didn't start with any great mission other than to basically keep myself out of the nut house. I mean, it's good therapy. The writing was always therapeutic for me. The newspaper work was extremely important and the number one job, but the writing fiction and sort of being able to actually, open the gaskets and let go and unleash, the personal feelings you might have had, and also to get to the true marrow of how, for instance, political corruption works, which you can sort of explain in a news story, but the relationships between lobbyists and politicians and developers or rock mine owners, whoever happens to be, the whole relationship that facilitates a corrupt or a compromised act. You can't explain that clearly in a short newspaper story, but you can get in there and do it in a good way in a novel. It also can be funny because there are funny aspects to it.
Well, I want to ask you about that. I mean, how do you keep it funny? You're writing about things that are very often based in the reality of environmental destruction and devastation or the loss of species. Um, and you're doing it for young audiences, you're doing it for adult audiences. But how do you keep your sense of humor about things that are so dire?
Some days it's not easy. When I was doing the column for that was a different kind of muscle. Once a week I wrote the column and it was in the paper right away. So. And you move on to the next column. A novel is something you live with as you're writing it for a year and a half, and it's a much different not style of writing, but the pace of the writing is so much different. So you want something. You want people to be able to turn you want them to want to turn the pages, and you want them to be laughing for all the right reasons, and they're in on the joke. They get that this is satire. They understand that there's a target, and that the root of all satire comes, I think, from, as I've said before, a sense of anger and injustice, and there's something wrong in the world that you've got to write about and poke fun at in a fairly acidic way. But personally, as I said, it's just. At some level, you're just ranting and flailing inside, but the writing can't come off like that. The writing's got to be precise, and it's the struggle doesn't get any easier the older you get. But I do think it's important, and people love to laugh. And this is a time, that it was shortly after I retired from writing the Herald. Just like within weeks after I stopped writing, and I've been with the paper, close to 46 years. Enough is enough, right? And I thought, well, okay, I've done everything. And then only a few weeks later, the Matt Gaetz story breaks. And I'm thinking, oh, now here's when I'm going to miss the column, is when these big, fat, slow pitches come down the middle of the plate. Those are the days that I regret not doing it.
You have a new book coming out, Fever Beach, in March.
May. It's in May, coming out in May, yeah.
Oh, sorry about that. I don't want to give you an unrealistic deadline there.
Don't worry, it's done.
You also recently got to see one of your books turned into a really successful Apple TV series called Bad Monkey. How was that process for you, watching it turned into something serialized and so popular?
Yeah, no, I was. You're always pleasantly surprised when one of your children that you've turned over to Hollywood doesn't turn out like the Charles Manson Daycare Center. When they do a good job and it's fun and it follows the theme of the book, it's a pleasant surprise. I thought Vince Vaughn was great in the title role when I wrote the novel. They always say, well, who did you cast in your mind when you're writing this character of Yancey, or who were you thinking of? And I don't think of any Hollywood actors. I think they exist in my mind in a certain way, but I don't ever put a face or an actor to, I just never done that. But when they told me Vince was interested and wanted to do it, and I thought about it, and I thought, man, he'd be perfect, and he pulled it off, I think. Yeah, so it was fun, and there's going to be another season. And, the regret, as I've said before, is I was on the set a couple of days, but I never got to meet the monkey, and and the monkey, his name is Crystal, and she's one of those famous Hollywood monkeys there is, and she left in the middle of Bad Monkey to go do a Spielberg movie. So she's,
wow.
And we had to shoot around her until she came back. So she's, you can imagine, she's kind of a diva. I got a bit of a beef with her, and then when we went to the premiere out in Hollywood. The irony is that they had it at a museum, and they have a no monkey policy at the museum, so she couldn't even come to the premiere. And this monkey had starred in A Night at the Museum, the Ben Stiller movie. They wouldn't let her come to the museum, not even on the red carpet. So I was pissed. I think she's just dodging me, honestly. She doesn't want any notes about her performance, so we'll get it settled.
Yeah, I hope you get to close that loop and track down that monkey.
Yeah, that's my one regret about the series is, we'll get it settled. we'll meet up at the Bel Air Hotel or something, have
You'll
a drink.
figure
We'll
it
get
out.
it straightened out.
Yeah. Randy, I want to bring you into the
Yeah,
conversation. Carl obviously is coming to town as part of the speaker series.
right.
How did you settle on bringing him in? Why did you want to bring him in? And also, he's being interviewed by Mark Woods, who's also a
Yes,
wonderful columnist on
yes.
his own right here at the Times-Union.
Well, Carl Hiaasen is the ultimate Florida man. We tried to we started off with Boris Johnson, with we had a little politics there, and then we ended up with some spirituality and some health with Deepak Chopra, and we thought, who better to anchor this whole deal than Carl Hiaasen, especially with all the, everything's going on in the world today. We
Yeah,
need some humor.
I think it'll definitely be funny. And Kendra, this is a benefit that's hosted by the Women's Board of Wolfson Children's Hospital. Just remind us briefly, what is the goal of the series?
The goal of the series is to raise money for the Children's Hospital. Right now, we're raising $1.5 million to buy new Kids Care Mobile ICU units that are desperately needed in our region. And so we hope everybody will go out and buy tickets, come see Carl, come support the hospital.
Yeah. Carl, what are you going to be talking about when you come to Jacksonville?
I don't know. What do they want me to talk about? I mean, I actually, seriously, I tell a lot of kind of true stories that have found their way from a headline into one of the novels. I tell about stories that were so outrageous that I couldn't put them into a novel, even my novels, and just about Florida in general. I try to bounce off the news as much as I can. I kind of change each time I go, and I don't do many of these anymore, but I try to stay as current as I can and stay as connected to that particular audience. In this case, it's such a good cause, and I don't always get to address audiences that are involved in causes like this. I mean, I try to, but this is an exceptional hospital.
Yeah.
It does amazing work, and I was just incredibly flattered that I could, that they asked me to come.
One of the reasons that you began writing as a column, you've said, is because you wanted somebody speaking out there that sort of states the obvious, that you felt like sometimes those weren't being, the thing that everybody knew but nobody was saying. And I wonder if you're, in the current media environment, concerned about people speaking truth to power or stating the obvious. There's a lot of, I think, fear in the media community, not just because of the shrinking size of it, but for other political reasons.
I agree. It's been disheartening to see Bezos. He owns the Washington Post, one of the great newspapers of all time, and it was disheartening to see him kill a political cartoon that would never have happened under Ben Bradley or the when the Graham family had the paper. So it's a different world. It's disheartening to see Zuckerberg undergo a complete personality transplant and start and decide that the truth doesn't matter on Meta platforms. That there's no need for fact checking. That kind of thing. It goes against everything as a professional journalist you're talking about. And then these aren't, Facebook isn't a journalism platform. But after what happened January 16th, they had a legitimate concern that they helped contribute to an incredibly violent act that several people were killed, police officers too. And
Carl Hiaasen, we're actually going to have to leave it there. I've run up against the clock. Thank you so much for being here. Kendra McCrary, Randy DeFore, thank you all so much for being here.
All right. Well, thank you. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
All right.
Bye,
We'll be-